to The Back Cover, the podcast that explores the classic soul music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Karen Williams. Join me and my co-host Steve Williams, no, we're not related, as we flip over the album covers and share stories of the movers and shakers that created, wrote, and produced those iconic sounds. We'll educate and entertain you, all while keeping the music alive. Hello, everybody. Well, we're in the second month of 2021, February, of course. And it's also Black History Month. However, on our show, we talk Black music history all the time. But this time, we're going to be talking about some of the famous record labels that helped launch the careers of gospel artists that then in turn became secular artists. And we'll also be talking about some of the owners of those record labels. So sit back and listen. Hope you're having a great year.
And hello, fine people of the back cover. I'm Smooth Steve Williams.
And I'm Karen Williams.
And no, we are not related, not by a long shot. Maybe a short shot, but not a long shot. And today we're going to talk about two record companies that were very, very instrumental in the early phases of what became R&B and gospel. They didn't call it that back then, but that's what it came to be, according to Mr. Jerry Wexler, who was part owner of Atlantic Records. He came up with the phrase R&B, from rhythm and blues. We're going to talk about specialty records and also King Records. Now, if you can go back into your mom's or your grandmother's stack or your father's stack, and if you see 45s, they were blue and silver font that said King Record. You remember those? All right, specialty records, the label was white and yellow, and everything was in black as far as the script. And specialty. And they came up with that name because it truly was a special label. It was started by a guy by the name of Art Roop, pure vegan.
Oh, was in the 50s?
Late 40s and parts of the 50s. Yeah. Well, late 40s on into the 50s. As a matter of fact, he's now in his 90s.
That's because he was a vegan.
He's a vegan. And it's work. That's work. You can say what you want to say.
Yeah, especially back then. Because, everybody was eating meat back then.
And he didn't eat anything that bled. That's what he said. Even fish. He was pure vegan. He didn't even wear leather. Specialty Records was an American record label founded in Los Angeles in 1945 by Art Roop. It was known for its rhythm, blues, gospel, and early rock and roll, having recorded, get this now, Little Richard was his main artist at the time.
Okay.
Guitar Slim, Percy Mayfield, Hit the Road, Jack, don't come back no more. That was Percy Mayfield.
Okay.
He wrote that.
Okay.
And gave it to
Ray Charles.
There you go, baby. And Lloyd Price. Roop started the company under the name of Jukebox Records, but changed it to Specialty when a partner of the company and a couple of his original partners just went to the wayside. He cut his circle down. Now, Roop's daughter restarted the label in the 1980s, and she sold it to Fantasy Records.
And
Fantasy. Now, the major producers
Who's
Fantasy. They are a company that exists in L.A. If you look at them now, they are a company that purchase labels or libraries of labels that are no longer in existence. Okay. Now, the major producer for the label was Roop, Roberts Bumps Blackwell, Johnny Vincent, J.W. Alexander, remember that name?
Okay.
And Bumps Blackwell, remember that name. Roop was known as one of the most honest owners of an independent R&B record company. Honest, right? In the 1950s, which was, he was known for paying his artists, recording them well, and allowing some of the wildest R&B to be issued on any label of the day. He was also known for hating payola because, you know, it was running rampant back in those days. But by 1953, the only way for Specialty to remain competitive was to pay like everybody else. Now, Specialty was also on its own publishing company, Venice Music for BMI licensed song and Greenwich Music for ASCAP. Some of the roster on Specialty Records. Now, mind you.
Now, let me ask you this question. What
Okay.
makes Specialty so... Okay, so they had black artists, but what made them so special?
Okay, I'm glad you asked. Specialty Records, based in California, was one of the first record companies to really be, I want to say, truthful in the business of the business.
Okay.
A lot of black gospel people went there because they were giving good contracts and they treated the people well. I mean,
was it all just a black label?
no, it was not. It was a tri-label. The tri was blues, gospel, early rock and roll. Remember, Little Richard really got that name out there. He couldn't get signed anywhere else. No one else wanted to.
Well, he was very unique.
He was very unique. Now, along with Little Richard came his band, the Upsetters. Along with that, a guy from Texas named Guitar Slim. Got it? Mm-hmm. Blues guy. They had some of the best writers in the day. Now, they had a lot of quartets, and their number one quartet was the number one quartet in the country at the time. And it really was two, but they had one of the two. They had the Soul Stirrers, not with Sam Cooke, not with Johnny Taylor. They had them with the original quartet leader, R.H. Harris. They were out of Houston, Texas at the time.
Okay.
Now, when they acquired them, it wasn't long before the group moved to Chicago, Illinois, which became the hub of black gospel music.
Right.
And along with that came the exit of Rebert H. Harris and the entrance of a young 18-year-old Sam Cooke.
So let me ask you, so what was this dude? I mean, was he like just looking for black acts, or what? Do you know what got him in the business?
What got him in the business was he was a fair man. Mm-hmm. Along with the Soul Stirrers, he had J.W. Alexander, which was a member of the number two gospel group by the name of the Pilgrim Travelers.
Okay.
Got that? Uh-huh. But J.W. was on Specialty as a manager to Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers. And then when Sam decided to leave the Soul Stirrers, he didn't go to the group. He went to Art and said, Art, I want to cut secular side. He said, well, what about the group? He said, well, I'll tell you about that later. But right now, I need to record under a different name. And the name that he recorded under was Dale Cook. He recorded the song that he wrote for the Soul Stirrers called Wonderful and changed the lyrics to Lovable. And Dale Cook began.
And he recorded on the
Specialty Records.
Okay.
Uh-huh. But see, at that time, what kept Specialty in the black was Tutti Frutti, Oh Rudy, written by Little Richard, produced by Bumps Blackwell.
Okay.
And Percy Mayfield, blues artist. And see, along with those artists, it was the gospel side and the R&B side that made Specialty stick out. Now, mind you, all of these people that recorded for this label lived in the East Coast. Mm-hmm. Specialty was on the West Coast. They had to drive all the way out there. And the biggest thing that Specialty did for all of their gospel artists, they had in 1955 one of the biggest gospel live recordings ever to be recorded at the Shrine Auditorium, 1955 in Los Angeles. They had a cavalcade of artists, and they recorded them live. It had never been done.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And
I guess if you had that record, that would be.
I got the CD.
Okay, but you don't have the actual.
I don't have the actual album. But here's just a small roster. The Five Blind Boys of Alabama.
I heard of them.
Got it? Alex Bradford, Winona Carr, Clinton Chenier, Eugene Church, my favorite homegirl, Birmingham, Dorothy Lovecoats, and the original gospel harmonettes,
Yes.
Sam Cooke, the Soulsters. Here's another name, remember, from Detroit, John Lee Hooker, a boom, 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 boom. That was before he went to chess.
Okay.
Little Richard, also Guitar Slim, Roddy Jackson, and Jimmy Liggins, country.
Okay.
They had some of the biggest independent artists to be recorded at that time. And Art Root would not spare a quarter.
And so with all of those, what happened to them? Why they implode?
They did not implode. They existed for a long time. What happened, Art kind of got tired.
Okay.
He was aging.
Right.
And they came with he kept
They had an offer. He couldn't refuse.
But here's what he did. He sold the record label. He never sold
the
publishing company.
Right.
That's why you have companies now that are going into music groups because they're buying up all the old libraries, not so much the label. See, you could say Motown, but it's owned by Universal Music Group.
Right. And, I've been looking at more and more people, independent artists, are selling their stuff, their catalogs.
They're selling their catalogs or they're leasing the catalog.
Well,
Yep.
A lot of people are selling, though. Somebody else the other day just sold. I forgot who it was, and I was going to tell you. I'm like, they're older. A lot of them are older artists. But some of them aren't that old, and they're still selling them. I'm
now,
like, I don't
here's
know
what the confusion is to some people. Let's take my homeboys, the Five Blind Boys of Alabama.
Okay.
They went to school.
Were they all blind?
Some of them, but the artists, yes. Yeah.
Well,
but the guys that led them around just had on dark glasses so he could lead them around.
Because I was like, are they all blind or is this all just...
But now they had a distinctive sound, the Five Blind Boys of Alabama.
Okay.
They would choke down everything. And what I mean by choke down, they would take the lyrics instead of the blow-in harmony, whoo, they would go, wah, ha, ha, hoo. And you could tell who they were.
Okay.
Then the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi.
Okay, maybe I was confused with
So you got to know what group you're hearing when you're listening to
Five
them.
Blind Boys in Mississippi.
They were totally different. They didn't choke down their lyrics. They did the blow-in harmonies. But Clarence Fountain of the Five Blind Boys of Alabama was the lead singer. Okay. He recently passed about 2 years ago. The man could go. He could go. I mean, he would be all over the stage and you'd be scared he's going to fall off. Never fell. And the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, I'm having a brain fart right now. But anyway, their lead singer, his name was, I forget it right now. But anyway, they were two distinctive different. See, lead singers of groups back in those days were like growlers. So when Sam Cooke came along for the Soulsters,
and he was mellow.
He blew everybody's mind. That's what got the younger audience of the young ladies and the young men.
And because he was nice looking.
He was nice looking.
And he was young.
He
wasn't an old blind man.
Shame on you.
So there's the Blind Boys of Florida, the Blind Boys of Louisiana.
No, none of that.
Just Alabama and Mississippi.
Alabama and Mississippi. Now, let's go to my homegirl, Dorothy Lovecoats from Birmingham. Dorothy was about 6'4", and she had some of the singing sisters behind her. My Lord. I get excited when I hear some of their old songs now because Dorothy was a whaler. She was at that time, the two competitors at that time for Gospel Queens were Dorothy Lovecoats and Clara Ward. Mm-hmm. Clara Ward and Dorothy Lovecoats, those groups, they dressed immaculately. They had designer wigs, and they would go. They could
They had
go.
them big wigs.
Big,
back in the
huge
60s
wigs.
and 70s.
Was girls now worry about tracks? No, it was all tied down.
Mm-hmm.
And also the Reverend Alex Bradford, and the Caravans featuring James Cleveland.
Oh, that's right. He was with them for a while.
Now, what happened? As people were getting to be well known, because Art Root would...
Wait a minute. Where was this? You said this was in California?
Art was in California.
Okay.
Now, what happened was the specialty gospel artists were making so much noise on the radio, it drew in a little everybody. John Lee Hooker. You know, John Lee Hooker, the blues artist, had a special way of talking a song. He didn't sing. He talked it. I'm going to shoot you right down. Right off of your feet. Boom, 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 boom. He wasn't singing nothing. But that was still his version of the blues. Percy Mayfield, great pianist. I don't think Percy could sing a lick. That's just me. Mm-hmm. But he could do that phrasing so well. But all of his stuff fit Ray Charles just right. Because Ray had that background of the Raylettes / the Cookies that brought out the churchy sound.
Right.
Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more. No more, no more, no more. Mm-hmm. Now, Percy could sing that, but his voice was kind of bassy.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. Jimmy Liggins, little short country singer, howler from Nashville. All of these people went out to California from the East Coast to record. You know how long of a drive that is?
You know I don't drive more than 3 hours, and I'm ready to take a nap. So...
But what's happening now?
It would take me 8 weeks to get to the West Coast.
It would take you 8 months.
Because I'd have to stop and eat, go to the bathroom, go to sleep.
But see, for these artists driving in those big cars like they had back in the 40s and 50s, gave them rehearsal time.
Well,
they were rehearsed in the car.
It's fine. I'd still have to stop, go to the bathroom, and eat, sleep, get up.
But now... you also see what Specialty owned 2 publishing companies. They own Venice and Greenwich. Yep.
You got all these records, don't you? The gospel ones.
My mom bought everything. Everything. And then a lot of these groups split and ventured out into different, not different genres, but different groups.
Okay.
You got me? Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can find one. Like, for instance, Sam was with the Soul Stirrers.
Right.
Then he became Sam.
Right.
By himself.
Then the Caravans, some of them split up?
They split up. But they stayed. What happened was, what happened to the Caravans, a young Shirley Caesar was with them at the time. She wanted to record her own solo album because she was the draw.
Right.
Albertina Walker, Inez Andrews, Dorothy Norwood, all of them could sing. They could go. But little young Shirley brought the crowd. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is Kojic.
Right.
They came out.
Right.
And see, all of these groups, either they were on one label or the other, they all traveled together in a gospel cavalcade, if you will, because you remember that a lot of these places, entertainment was only there for a certain amount of time. In the South, entertainment was there more or less in the fall because the money was there in the fall after bringing in your harvest. Mm-hmm. And the weather was better. So in the summertime, all of these artists were in the North or in the Southwest. Very seldom did they go to big cities. Now, then they would be on the Chitlin circuit, as we called it. The Chitlin circuit would be the Howard, the Apollo, the Regal in Chicago, Philadelphia. I forget the name of that particular venue, but you understand where I'm coming from. Those were the Chitlin circuits, where all of these were fabulous stages, but they were in the black neighborhoods. Right. Yeah. Art saw that untapped talent, and he took care of his artists.
He probably was like the guys who owned Blue Note, which was the jazz cover. Remember, they just loved jazz.
That's right.
And they said, we just going to record jazz. And they really weren't, I don't know if Art Roop was like this, but they really had they just didn't really think about the money that much. They were like, we love it. We want to get it out. And we're going to treat the artist right and blah, blah, blah. Right. So that's what happened with Blue Note. And I don't know, maybe he was the same, even though it sounds like he did make money, but, you know. Well, he didn't need very much, so he didn't really need a lot.
Him, though. It was the artistry.
Right, and he was a vegan, so, he wasn't eating, so he could get away with.
His biggest act on the roster was always Sam Cooke, in more ways than one, because Sam was, after he broke away from the Soul Stirrers, he was getting hits.
But I thought you said
wait. And then he was writing hits for the Soul Stirrers.
Okay.
And then when Sam, for publishing reasons and bigger label, that's when Sam decided to go to RCA. But Art recommended him to go to them.
Okay.
Because then RCA had the two biggest artists in the United States.
Who?
Sam Cooke and Elvis Presley.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't treat Sam as well as they treated
Elvis. Of course not. Not in them days.
But then Sam reached out and got this agent, Klein. And Klein went to RCA and they gave him better deals. Okay. See, I remember telling you one time, at that time, it was unheard of for an artist to write his own music, produce his own music, and then own his own music as far as publishing and things like that. Wasn't heard of, and especially an African American.
Right.
Especially.
Because even Elvis didn't do all that.
No, but now Sam had one thing that Elvis didn't have. At that time, Sam had already owned his own record company and publishing company. Mm-hmm. Sam, all of his stuff was recorded early on Keen, Keen, Keen. Mm-hmm. Then he started SAR Records. Now, remember I told you the name J.W. Alexander? J.W. Alexander and Sam started SAR Records, along with another soul stir, Mr. S.R. Crane.
Okay.
He left the group and went into business with Sam. Sam signed so many black artists. 1, Johnny Taylor. 2, the O'Neill twins, who later went into gospel. Okay. He signed the Soul Stirrers. He signed, I don't know if they stayed with him long, but the Pilgrim Travelers.
Okay.
These people were doing things unheard of. Unheard of. But then we turned the page to another record company, this time out of the Midwest. You ready?
Okay.
Sidney Nathan. Okay. Like Nathan's hot dogs? Mm-hmm. Related.
Oh, so they took their record money and gave it a bunch of hot, which is probably right now more profitable than a record company would be.
Hot dogs, man. Hot dogs.
I had some of those when I went to
New
York.
And they are good.
They were okay.
And to me, they are, oh my goodness, they are so good.
They were okay. I saw the sign. I saw the stand.
You did?
Everything, yeah.
King Records, Cincinnati, Ohio, 1943 to 1971. Now, if you saw King's 45 in your mama, grandmama, uncle, auntie's house, a 45,
right?
9 times out of 10, depending on what decade it was, it could have been one Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. It could have been Lil Willie John. It could have been, very much so, at that time, Roy Brown.
No.
Valerie Carr.
No.
Jack Dupree. Otis Williams and the Crystals.
No.
And not the Temptations, Otis Williams.
No, I know.
I'm sorry, Charms.
Okay.
Joe Hunter. Joe Tex. Here's one you know.
I know Joe Tex too. Go ahead.
But here's one you know.
Who?
Johnny Guitar Watson.
Maybe it was Johnny Guitar Watson.
Billy Ward and the Dominoes, 60-Minute Man. And for sure, later on, you saw the name that everybody will remember forever.
Oh,
James Brown.
maybe that's the one.
And
I
his
saw.
famous Flames. And the record was probably Please, Please.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah,
Please. Sid did not like that record.
because it just was just please, 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 please.
Where's the song? Please? That's all he's saying. Please, please. King Records is an American label founded in 1943 by Sid Nathan in Cincinnati, Ohio. United States, the label owns several divisions, including Federal Records, which launched the careers of James Brown. It released original material until 1975 and now operates as a reissued label. In the beginning, King specialized in, get this, country. Because, Cincinnati and Nashville ain't far apart.
Yeah, that's true.
At the time known as hillbilly music, King advertised if it is a king, it's a hillbilly. If it's a hillbilly, it's a king.
Wow.
One of the label's hits was I'm Using My Bible for a Road Map by Reno and Smiley. Important records in this field were done by Delmar Brothers, Wayne Rainey, the Delmars, and Moon Mullican played a country boogie style that was similar to rockabilly. Several King artists, such as Bill Bench and other rockabilly Hall of Famers. Queen Records was the race record.
Oh, so it was King and Queen.
Uh-huh. But it said was the race record,
Yeah,
meaning...
it was the black folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Division of King Records and was also owned by Sid Nathan. It was founded in 1943 and was eventually folded into King. King also owned Federal Records, which launched the careers of James Brown. The label hired Ralph Bass as recording R&B musician and such as Hank Ballard, Roy Brown, Valerie Carr. I already said all those names, you know them. But here's the thing about King Records. King, of course, preceded Motown and Chess.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say VJ.
Probably.
Now, here's the thing about King Records. Sid Nathan had a really, really bad anger problem. And he figured if he spend his money on you, you better bring him something really, really good. And the only way that James Brown got pleased by Sid was because the producer had saw James Brown live show.
And saw how he did.
And saw how he did it. It was a church style call and respond. Now, remember, King Records is in Cincinnati, Ohio. Guess who's from Cincinnati, Ohio?
Bootsy. They call
baby
Bootsy.
mama. But now, as it went on with King Records, the people that preceded James Brown actually borrowed from them. The biggest star at that time on King Records was Little Willie John. The second biggest artist was Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. They had one rule, only one. We don't go on to midnight in their contract.
So you had to stay up till midnight to see Hank Ballard and the Midnighters.
That means they were going to close the show.
Right.
Little Willie John was a dynamite artist. No one wanted to go on behind him anyway. So the deal was with King, they never were on the same ticket.
On the same ticket.
Lil Willie John had a group of brothers called the Upsetters. And he got them from his brother off of Specialty Records called Little Richard. Richard went back to the Church of God in Christ for a minute. The Upsetters didn't have a leader. Lil Willie John steps in and calls it, I need a band. And they would get on stage and you'd have to mop up the sweat after they got off. I'm telling you, these two record companies and the people that were on it were dynamic. But the one thing that Art took care of his people and he took care of their catalogs. Sid, not so much.
Okay.
Sid was the person that instrumented the sale of the twist from Hank Ballard to Dick Clark.
Okay.
Made Chubby Checker a household name.
But that's the only song he ever made.
That's the only song he ever sings, even to this day, in his 80s.
And Let's Twist Again like we did last summer.
That was just a rip.
Yeah.
But those two companies, even the music lives on today. Johnny Guitar Watson.
Johnny Guitar Watson.
Out of Texas.
Guitar.
Yeah. All right. Joe Tex. All these are Texans.
Yeah.
These guys were seen by an A&R guy from King Records, and he discovered all of them in concert, like he did James Brown. He would go. Now you would think it was kind of suspicious. You see a white boy in a honky tonk. No,
not in a honky tonk.
I said no, but
No.
you would think it was suspicious if you saw him in a juke joint.
Yeah. Because it's different.
It's a different.
In the honky tonk, they go, yeah. Black people don't go to honky tonks.
No, at least not then.
They don't. Right about now, I wouldn't go now either.
Here's another artist off King Records that spawned another star who was a boxer as well. You remember I said Billy Ward and the Dominoes?
Okay.
Billy Ward went to the service.
Okay.
Guess who replaced him? Before you say it, I'm going to say it and help you out. His name was...
I know who it is.
Who?
Go ahead and say it.
No, say it. You bad.
No, go ahead and say
No,
it.
I want to see. I want to see.
Go ahead, say it.
That's because you don't know.
I do know who it is, but I can't. Believe me, I can't.
Who? I buy you some popcorn.
No, I don't want no popcorn. I know who it is.
I'm gonna give you.
He's a boxer too. And he sang. Oh my gosh, I know his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. Okay, I don't know. Say it.
His name hails from Detroit.
Yeah.
Jackie Wilson.
Right.
He sang with the Dominoes when Billy Ward went to the service. The problem was when Billy Ward came back,
they didn't want him.
they didn't.
Why would you? You got Jackie Wilson.
You got Jackie Wilson. But see, Jackie had a problem. Jackie had an anger problem too. And I think it was the great Maya Angelou says, "Why does the caged bird sing?" Mm-hmm. Jackie didn't need no group. He didn't. And then he met this guy who also was a singer and a songwriter. Not so much a singer, but a songwriter. And a boxer. Hailed from Detroit. What was his name?
Barry Gordy.
Come on, say it.
Barry Gordy.
There you go. So King, one artist, two labels, turned into 4 or 5 different artists, 5, 6 different labels.
Yeah.
So you can think.
So like, who was recording black folks before then?
Nobody.
So, but what about the chick in the 30s? Bessie Smith and all of them. Who was recording
There was
them?
a record company in Chicago. I do not know the name, but now here's the thing. There was one thing that James Brown did not like about Sid Nathan. Sid Nathan figured if he had to spend some money, you can't tell him what to do. So James Brown removed the middleman. There is an album in existence right now called James Brown live at the Apollo Theater, I believe it's 63 or 64. It was his first live album. It became the highest rated live album ever to be sold. It has not, that record has not been broken till this day. James Brown recorded it live at the Apollo with his own money. He told Sid, "I'm my own man. I'm my own company. You don't want to pay for this? fine, but you get none, of the money off the top. Because this is a James Brown Enterprise production. And he paid the whole recording staff. He paid everybody that had to do the work that night. Do you realize in about a month he had made over close to $1 million?
Wow.
Sid Nathan did not like that. But it was on King labels.
Right.
Yep.
But he got some money.
Huh?
He got some money.
Oh, no. It was just on the label. It didn't belong to the label.
Oh. Well, how did you...
Distribution.
He got distribution money.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
but
I said.
But you think about this now. At that time, you had distribution done by distributing companies that got more of the money than he did. James Brown got all.
Yeah, I could see him getting all the money, but I'm like,
Sid was mad because he didn't stand behind James.
Right.
Like Art stood behind the promoter for the Great Gospel Shriners show in 1955 in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Art Root made a ton of money. Like you said earlier, like for a man that didn't eat no meat, he had a lot of money.
He could buy lots of vegetables.
Lots of vegetables. In California, too?
Oh, yeah.
They weren't expensive.
No, he would just probably had a giant farm and would just go out there and pick them himself.
If he did, yeah. So, Sid, who was a largely overweight guy.
Obviously not a vegan.
Oh, hell no. He ate everything, including meat. But Sid went down in history as being one of the notorious record labels.
Yeah, owners.
Yeah, owners. But as a memory to the city of Cincinnati, they never tore down the building. As a matter of fact, they are working hard now trying to get it to be a historical landmark.
Is that where, since Bootsy is from Cincy, did he record there? Because I think I've seen that building.
Yeah.
I think that they were
See,
working.
Bootsy belonged.
It was boarded up when I saw it.
Well, yeah, it's boarded up. Yeah. Well, think about Vivian with VJ Records. Vivian never separated the company from her.
Right.
It was VJ Records, Vivian and James.
Right.
That's who owed the taxes.
Right.
They had a silent partner. No, they didn't have a silent partner. They had another partner, Uric Abner. Mm-hmm. Great guy. Heavy gambler. But he was a great guy. He owned half the company. Instead of her being VJ Records Incorporated, them three little words, three little letters,
right?
It was VJ Records.
Right.
See, I don't know everything. Never said I did. But when you don't know the business of the business, it could bite you.
Yeah.
A lot of people, Otis Reddy, before he died, owned his own record company while he was still recording on Stax. But it was an independent record company with an independent publishing company, which his wife still owns today. It's not so much as the label, but the library that it creates, if it creates one.
I always wondered why Michael Jackson didn't step out and get his own label.
He didn't have to. He owned half of Sony.
Well, yeah, that's true. And then, but Prince had his own label.
Prince had his own label, publishing, and everything.
Yeah.
Paisley Park was a business. He just happened to live in the building.
Right.
It was a dual building.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
But I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. I'll say again, I don't know everything, but I know what I know.
Doesn't know everything.
And business is your business. That's why when Sid Nathan told James Brown, he was letting him know, he was putting him in his place. James, it's show business. You are the show. I am the business. Okay? In other words.
Yeah, you just a little. You get out there and dance and sing.
Right. I can't do what you do.
Right. You can't do what I do.
And he said, Sid, my name is Mr. Brown. They got into arguments, man, in Cincinnati at King Records like nobody else's business. And another person that Sid could not stand, but he couldn't go on without him. Little Willie John. Because that little 5'4" little man sold out everywhere he went, as well as Hank Ballard and the Midnighters from Detroit. See, all these people from Detroit, they either had to go to Chess Records, which was just getting up to par, or down to Cincinnati.
Well,
And even the people in Nashville came to Cincinnati. But you never hear people talk about Cincinnati
as a record
capital.
Yeah.
Never.
never
Because they didn't know. People would have 45s. I'm kind of a nerd. I would get records and read them, as well as albums, read them.
Right.
Liner notes, read them.
Right. And just see who the artists were. I would read them to see who the other musicians were, who the producer was. And that's how when you start reading, you go, oh, this guy was on that album.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah.
this guy. And then sometimes you'd see famous musicians play behind. And you'd be like, oh, what is he doing? Wow, he's playing on this album.
But see, now they're making money. Then they were just guest artists.
Yeah.
But see, now if you say, for instance, if I was on your album, I wouldn't be just a guest artist, but I have a point off of your album. That means when you like if I sign on a contract, I get $20 for every album sold.
Okay.
That's my 20 that's coming out of your money.
Okay. Oh. How do they do it when they
Even the rappers do it.
I've always wondered about that, and we don't talk about movies, but I've always wondered, you remember back in the old studio system day? You know, I look at a lot of old movies and documentaries about old movies, and they'll say, well, somebody was with MGM, but they loaned them out to so-and-so. And I'm like, do they get paid when they get loaned out?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I'm like, then that's like bad if they just one day come in and say, I made a deal with Paramount. You're going to be working at Paramount on this movie.
Remember, we always talk about Sam and Dave on Stax Records. They didn't belong to Stax Records. They were never signed to Stax Records. They were signed to Atlantic. Atlantic didn't have the time or the people to put them where they needed to be. So they sent them to, or loaned them to Stax Records. Stax had more writers. Isaac Hayes, Dave Porter, Eddie Floyd, Steve the Colonel Cropper, all these guys, Booker T, were not only just musicians, they were writers too.
Right.
Eddie Floyd and Steve the Colonel Cropper wrote Knock on Wood in the honeymoon suite at the Lorraine Motel.
Okay.
Now, Atlantic had a lot of artists that they had to loan out because they just didn't have the magic to put them together. Aretha Franklin, they sent her down to Muscle Shoals because the studio had the best band in that area. White guys, call them the Swampers.
Okay.
And they had more soul than an unwashed armpit. I mean, they were funky.
Yeah.
But in that loan, every time Sam and Dave made money on the Stax label with records, a portion of that would go to Atlantic.
Okay. I always wondered how they get around that
On loan.
people. Yeah, on loan.
I'm loaning
too.
you. Now you got to pay me back.
Okay.
So how do you pay me back? You give me a portion of that overall sale. And the thing that took VJ under, other than the taxes and everything, they had a group called Frankie Valli and
Four Seasons.
They recorded a live album. The album wasn't good at all. But Ewart Abner put the album out anyway. He released it. Didn't go anywhere. Had they made money off that album, they would have been around for a lot longer. But mind you, again, here we go. They had a group on the shelf that they never pulled off the shelf to record.
The Beatles.
Hello.
And if they had released the Beatles, oh my God, they would have been bigger than Motown.
But now, go down the street. Chess also had a group on the shelf.
The Rolling Stones.
Hello.
But you know, the Rolling Stones are still very active with Chess as an organization. I mean, even though they didn't, eventually get released by them, I guess they just always felt sentimental about them. and the artists, because they are involved in their blues foundation.
But now here's the thing. Although Chess kind of helped launch the Rolling Stones, they took Muddy's label of, Muddy's song, I Am a Rolling Stone. Mm-hmm. Keep that in your head. But they were successful with another African-American artist that they launched his writing career off of SAR Records. SAR Records signed a group called the Valentinos as a gospel group. The Valentinos were the Womack brothers and their father. Mm-hmm. It was Bobby Womack that wrote that song for he didn't write it for the Rolling Stones, but he wrote it for his brothers. And it took off because Sam owned the publishing. Right. See, it's like when you knock one domino down, the others keep going.
Right.
But it wasn't so. I want to say the record business back then, you could get a good deal off of a handshake, but you had to remember it was the paperwork that certified it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it still is now because all these young artists, you know how much we talk about every month or so, something comes out, one of these young artists are getting ripped off again. And I'm like, but we got so much history to show you how this happens. Why is this still happening?
I'm going to quote the great philosopher, Spike Lee. When you go into the field of your love or what you love, your gift, you don't go in thinking about the money, because if you do the business and you do it well, the money will come.
But you got to still do the business.
Oh, you got to do the business.
You got to do the paperwork.
But don't see, these kids are jumping in things because they want to get rich.
Yeah,
ain't nothing wrong with getting rich. But I'm going to quote another great philosopher.
Oh gosh,
Chris Rock. If Bill Gates woke up today and had Oprah Winfrey money, he'd kill himself. I rest my case.
Yeah, I could get rich today
and
off the lottery.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, there'd be, people have won the lottery and they've gotten rich and then they lose their money. Of course, I would never do that because I ain't stupid.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to The Back Cover. You can catch The Back Cover on TuneIn, Stitcher, and MyTuner. You can also listen to our show, The Ride Home, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Central Standard Time, on www.thesoundofsoul.net. Please have your friends and family like and subscribe to our podcast.